and our Pacific Coast Championship was at Catalina Island. So our strategy at that time was at the meet, was to jump in this one spot and stay ahead of everybody along the kelp edge. And by the time the 4 hours of the meet were over, we should have slowly fished this area and we would probably win the meet. We jumped in the water, we're going along, all of a sudden we're shooting fish, but there's not as much fish as there were the day before when we did scouting. We get to the end of the kelp, and here comes this guy through the water. He has the biggest stringer I've ever seen in my life. A stringer, this is no exaggeration, the stringer is this big, full of fish, and it's Jay Rife coming this way. Somehow he had got in front of us, he had shot the fish in front of us, now he's coming back, and we're screwed. We go to, this is the end of the area, there's nothing but a big bay, but the day before we had gone to the end of the area, which is about a mile or so across the bay, and we pulled plan D, which was for desperation. We went across the bay and we were able to do okay. But there's only 2 people in the United States that could have pulled that fish to the water. One was Jay Rife, the other is Art Pender. Enormously strong people and people that respect and give a lot of credit to. Now, in 1961, myself and Bob Weaver and Jim Baldwin had won some meets, and we had the Pacific Coast Championships in La Jolla. And everybody by that time had boards. We had paddle boards, and everybody knew everybody else's paddle board. And we were in the kelp, and we hadn't found any reefs. We found a rock pile here, some kelp there, a few fish here, a few fish there. And I heard my name called, and it was Jim Baldwin. He said, "Terry." And I saw him motion, and I knew that he had found something. He had found some fish just by the way he talked. And I looked around, and the board's out to sea, but there was 3 surf mats inside of us. But I looked around, there wasn't anybody on the surf mats. There was just Bob Weaver, my teammate, and Jim Baldwin. So I went on over and I looked around again, only 3 surf mats, no divers, boards out to sea, and I said, "What's up?" He said, "There's a pinnacle right below me, it's loaded." I said, looked around again, nobody in sight. I made a dive, it was loaded. Sheep's head going all over the place, and I could see it was a pinnacle like this, out in the middle of the kelp. As I came up, Jim Baldwin was looking over my left shoulder, and he said, "The sea bears are coming, the sea bears are coming." This was Jay Rife's team. And we had found a reef, but they're going to come and they're going to jump us, meaning they're going to, day of the tournament, they will be there with us, diving, taking our fish, and there's nothing we could do about it. But we've been jumped all during the year, and so I came up with something I called Plan B. And I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but I looked over my shoulder, the sea bears were coming, they were yelling at us, saying, "Well, we got your reef, we found your reef, we found your secret reef, we're going to take your fish, nya, 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 nya." And so I told Weaver and Baldwin, I said, "Dive out to sea, just take your time, dive out to sea." And I thought I've got to try Plan B, it probably won't work, but they're going to dive onto us. They're going to come up 15 feet away from us, they're going to clip their clips onto the kelp, and they're going to dive, they're going to find the reef, and we're going to have company during the tournament. So my board was facing this way, they were coming this way. I went underneath my board, I took my weight belt off, clipped my weight belt on the board. They were getting closer. I pulled my pants down. I put my butt over the back of the board like this. I kind of hunkered down a little bit. When they got about from here to the end of the tent, I straightened up and I said, "Oh, that was close. I almost shit my pants." And they stopped right there. They didn't come close. Jay was not only an immensely strong diver, he was a very smart diver. Somehow, I don't know how, he was hiding in the kelp, waiting for us, just stalking us. He circled us like Indians around a wagon train, and they never found a reef. And the next day, Jim Baldwin went out there and won individually the Pacific Coast Championships, did an incredible job, and we were able to win the main event. You haven't heard that story? These two people, Art Pender and my friend Del Rand. These guys are so good. It's unbelievable. When I first heard about Del Rand, I was reading Skin Diver magazine. I told my friend Steve Ray, oh bullshit, anybody can dive with one leg. So I went out the next time I went out diving. I said, here, Steve, take my pin. And so I made a dive down, and it's a little bit harder than usual. And I laid on the bottom, and I thought, I think I'll come up a little bit earlier. So I came up, and that was the last time I ever did that. It's too hard. I met Del during our competition, and he invited me to go lobster diving. We went to Flat Rock at Palos Verdes. We got there as the sun was going down. We drove all the way to Rocky Point. We came back when the sun was coming up. And the guy had tremendous endurance. And this guy is such a good shot. He's such a good tactician. He was such a good scouter. There's two people in the world that were tremendous scouters, maybe three. Terry Moss was very good. John Ernst was tremendous. This guy was tremendous also. He wouldn't tell me how he won these Pacific Coast Championships at Divers Cove, finally until about 40 years later. Finally, he let me know how he did it. It was really smart. We went on a trip in 1959. We went to Florida. And much to my surprise, the Florida people were very kind, very considerate, and opened their arms to us. Our tender said, hey, come on out in the boat with us. We'll go out, we'll show you around. Bob Bannicky, who I just learned today, died last year, was my teammate, and it really makes me really great to do this. Bob Weaver was my other partner, and Bob Weaver. I was talking to, when I first met Bob, I talked to him about 5 minutes. He said, you know, Terry, I'm afraid of sharks. And I said, okay, I've never seen a shark in my life. But so we got to be teammates. We did well in our tournaments. We went to Florida. We went on a trip thanks to Art. He had a 65-foot boat. He took us out for a 2-day trip. The first day, we didn't shoot much fish, but we were catching some lobster. I thought I was a good lobster fisherman. We found some areas where there was overhangs. And for every lobster I caught by hand, Art Pender was throwing maybe 8 to a dozen lobsters in the boat that he would get with a hook. It was really pissing me off. He was so good. It was embarrassing how good he was. And I thought, well, I heard about this guy, but wait till we get out and we start shooting fish. We'll see what he's got then. So the next day, we get out on his boat, and I got to tell you about his boat. 65 feet long. The last 20 feet does not have side rails. It's just sheer. Off to the stern drops 6 feet down to the water. If you want to get in the water, you've got to jump off 6 feet, or you've got to get on the boat that he's towing behind, and get on the nose of the boat, get in the boat, and get in the water. You've got to do one of these two things. You cannot get out of the water because it's 6 foot straight up and down. So we went out on the boat. We had Del and his two teammates. I had myself and Bob Weaver and Bob Bannicky. And we had that world-famous deep-water diver, Jack Kearns Jr., with us. And we had Marcia Rowland and her teammate, excellent divers. And somehow, some way, Artie found a pinnacle out in the, what is it, the Gulf Stream, out in the Gulf Stream. And this pinnacle was 45 foot deep to the top, and then it broke down, went all over the place. I was the first in the water. I couldn't stand it. I jumped in, 6 foot off, almost broke my fins in half. Right off the bat, I shot a pompano. It was like an aquarium. I've never seen anything like it. We may have been the first people in the world to dive that particular place. I don't know if we were or not, but it was incredible how many fish.